Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. For those of you who are new to the channel, I post these live streams regularly for more in-depth talk and participation from the community. If you prefer shorter videos, I also post short videos on my video tab, so you can go ahead to my video tab and check any regular updates if you prefer shorter videos. So welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers, all the new subscribers from all across the world. I posted a video earlier on with regards to the negotiations, and the likelihood or lack thereof of Hamas participating in these negotiations. Apparently, Qatar is trying to promise the United States that they will have some sort of representation. But we haven't heard a confirmation from Hamas yet, and we have Yahya Sinwar as the leader of the movement now. Things are escalating in general. All of the movements that we're seeing in the Middle East and Ukraine as well are signaling that we're looking to an escalation. The United States had its F-22s just arriving in the Middle East. Destroyers deployed, more carriers, aircraft carriers, and we have new Russian weapons in Iran, and Iran is sending more Iranian weapons to Russia to support them in Ukraine. Firstly, I'm going to start off with something important. We haven't heard from the United States officially that they will be participating in a war against Iran if the latter actually engages in a large-scale attack against Israel. However, we're seeing more and more talk in the United States mainstream media about Iran. And usually, when you hear more talk in the mainstream media about a country or about an individual, that means the United States administration is trying to prepare the public opinion for a potential attack against Iran to justify a potential action. Of course, we still have Kamala Harris now. Donald Trump is not the president yet, but if he does become the president, you're talking about the person who escalated things heavily against Iran, not for American purposes, but for Israeli purposes. He has a lot of backing from the evangelical community who traditionally support Israel a lot. He's backed by the Zionist lobby. He's funded by the Zionist lobby. He declared that the Golan Heights are part of Israel. He moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv when he was in power, and he assassinated Qasem Soleimani, and he was boasting about assassinating Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force and the IRGC at the time. The Quds Force is the force that Israel is worried most about when it comes to Iran. Why? Because this is the force that is in charge of delivering the goods for the resistance fronts in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and in other parts that target Israel and target United States bases and interests. This is very important. And when we say US bases and US involvement in the Middle East, again, the word interest is questionable here, because when you talk about US interests, when the administration talks about US interests, they usually talk about the interests of the elite, not the interests of the population. So what do we have now? We have the United States preparing the public opinion for a war. They're preparing them for a potential participation, okay? Although they said that we won't participate, they said we'll help defend Israel. They didn't confirm outright that they will be participating against Iran, but they're preparing. We've heard this talk about Iran supposedly trying to plot to assassinate Trump. Then we heard about them interfering in the elections. Funny enough, you hear about Iranian interference in the elections and Russian interference in the elections, and you don't hear about Israeli interference in the elections. How absurd is that? They constantly talk about other countries, but they do not talk about the main country that buys their politicians and funds their presidents. So they're preparing and they're deploying F-22s, arming Israel with Mk-82, 83, 84, now lifting the supposed banning that they wanted to have on a brigade from the IDF called Netzach Yehuda, or the Eternity of Judea, the one that is more aligned with radical figures like Itamar Ben-Gvir and primarily formed out of religious Zionists, right? Things are changing. Okay. Iran, we had a report that they already received 2,600 missiles. Some of them are cruise missiles with high levels of explosion. Okay, high levels. They haven't spoken about any radar systems. They haven't spoken about S-300s. They haven't spoken about any of that. When it comes to these air defense systems, they will disable the US power, again, unless the US is willing to take a risk in losing some of their fighter jets. Or if they want to attack their air defense systems with Tomahawks, they're going to have to use a hell of a lot of them because these systems are very advanced and they are able to stunt any potential attacks. So we're seeing that both countries are preparing and preparing heavily. Now, we heard about the Ukrainian invasion into Russia and Russia declaring a state of emergency in that particular part, Kursk, if I'm not mistaken. The United States say that we want to call the Ukrainians and we want to check, what are the reasons behind this, as if they don't know, like they deal with Israel. Oh, we didn't know about this attack. We didn't know about that. Although the EU are already justifying it, okay? The EU, they said that Ukraine is fighting a rightful defensive war based on international law. Ukraine is fighting a defensive war based on international law. Wow. All of a sudden, it's justified, right? Look at this. Ukraine has a right to defend itself, and this right to defend itself includes also hitting the enemy on his territory. That was Peter Stano, spokesperson for the commission. He told this to reporters, right? The White House, of course, they're acting like they don't know. We're asking them to learn about their objectives. Of course, you want to learn about their objectives, and you don't know and you had no clue. But this is very interesting. They're fighting a rightful defensive war based on international law. Ukraine has a right to defend itself, and this right to defend itself includes also hitting the enemy on his territory. Why did you not say that to Hamas? Why did you say that to Hamas on the 7th of October? Fighting an occupier, defending territory, and you also have a right to attack them in their own territory. You say that to Hamas. This is what they've done on the 7th of October, haven't they? Again, it's important to highlight this hypocrisy and double standards. And Ukraine is trying to get more aid from Israel. Ukraine is trying to get more aid from Israel. And we had statements from Brodsky, the Israeli ambassador to Ukraine, saying what? Saying we're already fighting Russia. Israel is already fighting Russia. How is Israel already fighting Russia? We're already fighting Russia in the Middle East. We're fighting Russia in its support for Iran, Hezbollah, and the resistance fronts, saying that he's using it as a justification, not to support Ukraine militarily, because they know there would be immediate implications from Russia. He in particular mentioned Iran, Hezbollah, and the Russian interference when it comes to Israel invading the airspace of Syria. There's a big Russian presence in Syria. Russia intervened militarily to save the Syrian government before the Obama administration was planning to have an attack combined with the NATO, similar to what they've done in Libya. However, we saw the US ships coming closer and then backing up. When Russia started to intervene, they have ports that they control in Syria. They have S-300s that they operate in Syria, and they have their army in Syria. And Israel knows that anything they do with Ukraine will immediately be translated to what's happening in Syria, and an increase that they do not want and would not welcome from Russia in terms of support for the resistance fronts. Now, what they're doing in Ukraine, the United States and NATO, they are sending messages. They are sending messages to Russia. You're sending this to Iran. You're backing them. Shoigu's there. And look what we can do. We can start attacking you in your own territories. Now, remember, this debunks the whole pseudo-narrative of the United States and the NATO when it comes to Russia. They are interested in Russia as a country. They are not interested in defending Ukraine or defending countries that are under occupation. You're talking about the United States of America. They support dictatorships. They support brutal dictatorships that commit crimes against humanity. And that's evident from all across the world, from Latin America to Africa to the Middle East to Asia, right? But they know, alongside the Russians, that what's happening in the Middle East is inevitably leading somewhere very big. We're talking about a regional escalation that could very, very easily escalate to a global war, to World War III, without being dramatic, without being sensational, without all of that. Why? Because we already have the alliances. We have the US and NATO and Israel. Of course, we have other countries that are trying to form groups here and there. And on the opposite side, we're seeing coalitions forming with stronger bonds. You see, ever since the war in Ukraine, the bond between Russia, China, Iran, and these countries, it's increased alongside other countries that Russia is helping support now against the United States hegemony. And we're hearing talks a lot about ending this era of unilateralism. We heard that when Shoigu was in Iran. We heard that when the Belarusian Air Force chief was there, Air Force commander was there. Clearly, they're looking at something bigger. And Iran is being more blatant, not that they weren't before, but they're more blatant about the Russian support for the United States. And I wanted to talk to you about one more thing before I open the space up to all of you for your participation. We had another confrontation. You see, you hear in mainstream media, what you're hearing about lately is frictions and disagreements between the Iranian president and the IRGC about the type of attack that they're going to carry out. Apparently, the Iranian supreme leader wants, and the IRGC, because he orders the IRGC directly, he wants to attack Tel Aviv directly, according to many reports on, the propaganda media. And that the new Iranian president, Pezeshkian, is saying, no, let's avoid that. We don't want something to escalate. Right? They're creating something out of nothing. Like these stories and fairy tales they used to create about Hamas and Yahya Sinwar and the lack of, unity in Gaza, although we have significant and almost unbelievable social cohesion in Gaza after this genocide. Although in Israel, they're having fights every Monday and Thursday. The latest one was the feud that happened between the IDF chief Herzi Halevi and several ministers, including Itamar Ben-Gvir. What was it about? It was about the rapists. It was about State Himan. The camp, it's not officially a prison, it's a camp, it's a torture camp, that they rape Palestinian detainees in, torture them, some of them to death, and he was criticizing it. And then we had a massive feud breaking up between him and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir is telling him, oh, you're only doing it for the Hague, right? You want to show the ICJ that you're doing stuff, you don't want more evidence and stuff like that. Look, they're saying it outright. Don't try and hide, our ugly side by trying to appeal to the ICJ. They already know how ugly we are, and we'll make sure that they know how ugly we are. This is what Ben-Gvir is saying. Although Herzi Halevi is trying to minimize the damage as if he doesn't already know. By the way, some of these people who say and criticize these things as if they don't know. They know, and they know what they've been doing all along in the West Bank and in Gaza. They know how they were established, and they had things under the carpet. Now that everything's clear, they're trying to minimize as much as possible, but still that's not working. And still there is a threat coming from Benjamin Netanyahu to sack some of these people. We also heard certain reports saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to use these latest assassinations to reach a deal. These are not substantiated. Why? Just today he assassinated another Hamas figure in Lebanon, and they're continuing their assassinations with regards to Hezbollah. They're still escalating. Benjamin Netanyahu wants to continue. He does not want a ceasefire. Even with their declaration of going to these negotiations, they're trying to buy time, and they're trying to prevent a strike coming from Iran. That doesn't seem like something that's going to work. That does not look likely. Why? Because the tone from Iran has constantly been escalating. More and more people from the government, from the army, from the IRGC are saying no, there will be attack. The latest statement we had from the IRGC is that we were ordered by the supreme leader to have a severe strike, and this is what we are working towards. However, again, because they know their response will lead to another Israeli retaliation, as confirmed by the Israeli defense minister and the Israeli prime minister, they want to make sure they have their backs covered with the most sophisticated and advanced weapons coming from Russia. And this is what I wanted to share with you in this live stream. Let me open the space up for all of you for your participation. Again, welcome everyone joining us. Thank you so much for Real Shakapia and Ig Chihuahua for your supers. Real Shakapia, our fearless leader. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. If anyone has any comments for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, just so I would not miss as much comments or questions directed to me. Molly Horn, Mali just expelled Ukrainian ambassadors. There were Ukrainian soldiers, regular army, fighting with anti-government troops. Yes, they are participating in Africa where you see Russian presence. And they are taking the role of the previous colonialists. So we're seeing a shift. France is being expelled, the US is being expelled, and these countries are welcoming Russia, are welcoming Chinese powers as well, because their approach with these countries is different to the colonizers, the arrogant supremacists who had a vast history of enslavement in Africa. As a matter of fact, with the departure of the French forces in some of these countries, you're seeing more unity, more strategic alliances, right? When you have more representation of the people. And similar things will happen in the Middle East, by the way, when you get rid of Israel and when you get rid of oppressive dictatorships too. Why? Because the people know what's in their benefit. Yet, it's not surprising. And we had statements coming out from Russia as well. We had statements from Russia confirming that they had confrontations with Ukrainians in Africa. And again, what does all of that show you? It shows you that we are looking at something global. We have alliances here, we have alliances there, and we have multiple battlefronts. We have Europe, we have the Middle East, we have Africa, we have Southeast Asia, right? It still hasn't started in a really big manner in Southeast Asia. They're delaying the case with Taiwan as much as possible because they want to get these things sorted first. But you are looking at confrontations with a couple of with multiple locations. And let's go to your next input. New Glow is asking me about Yemen. What we heard from Yemen is the recent statement from the Houthi leader, Ansarullah's leader, about the upcoming response. Okay. And I spoke about the different tones when it comes to Yemen, when it comes to Iran, and when it comes to Hezbollah with regards to the response. Iran said they will respond. We had a confirmation from Hezbollah that it might be a single response from them and other responses, or a joint response. They said Israel does not know, so they neither confirmed nor denied what's going to happen exactly. The statements that we heard from Yemen are that we're going to see a full response from all of the resistance fronts, okay? Or at least this is what we understood from them. And according to Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansarullah, he is saying that the only delays that are coming are due to tactical reasons. Tactical reasons. Why? Because to him, they need to make the final preparations. They need to make sure everything is protected properly so that they can have a very big and significant response, very big and significant response to Israel, to Israel. All that we know is we're hearing that we're going to see a big response. And again, Hezbollah said that this waiting game is part of the punishment. And the economic suffering of Israel, the high tensions, the fact that they're preparing so many things when it comes to the retaliation, the country's frozen. The top political level in Israel and the military level, when they have meetings from bunkers. They constantly, tell people that look at these people about, the resistance and its leaders hiding in bunkers and here and then. They're hiding in bunkers. They are hiding in bunkers all across, even when it comes to the meetings. Now, one of the declared potential targets was what's labeled as the Kiryat in Tel Aviv, the place that the operations are managed from. All of the operations are managed from. And they're having the place under extreme protection. And Benjamin Netanyahu is not moving without the approval of the head of his security team. Previously, he had a bit more freedom of movement. Now he can't even move without the authorization of the head of the security team. He gave orders to all of the security of Benjamin Netanyahu. The prime minister cannot move unless I authorize his movements. And Kate, the USA said no ceasefire agreement by August 15th, which means they are expecting the resistance to attack by then. That's a part of it. The other part is Hamas are not confirming. Hamas are not confirming attendance. And again, why should they? Israel killed the negotiator. Hamas already proposed several deals to Israel before the 7th of October. Listen, again, let's contextualize everything. We haven't had this case starting from the 7th of October. Of course, many of you know by now, especially if you started reading into things, that we have a conflict that's been going on for the past century, okay? At least with the formation of Israel, but before that too. Hamas, they have Israelis with them, soldiers. Some of them soldiers, some of them not declared as soldiers, at least by Israel. Some alive, some potentially dead, since 2014. Their families have been calling the government to release them ever since, but they always say that we've been neglected. Hamas offered them deals after deals after deals after deals to try and release some Palestinian prisoners in return for those Israelis who are held in Gaza since 2014. So we have Israelis in Gaza since 2014, 4 of them. That's before the 7th of October. They didn't reach a deal, they didn't reach a deal, they didn't reach a deal. Then we had the 7th of October. Immediately after the 7th of October, Hamas declared that we are willing to immediately engage in negotiations and we are willing to stop our attacks. But no, Israel, emotional, hate-filled response that was there to implement a project that they had from the 70s. A project that they had from the 70s to ethnically cleanse Gaza, get rid of the population, and implement certain new plans that they have, including economic plans like the gas exploration off the shores of Gaza and the Ben Gurion Canal. Benjamin Netanyahu handed out gas exploration contracts 2 weeks after the 7th of October, supposedly the biggest attack that Israel is facing, an existential threat, war, state of emergency. He's worried about handing out gas exploration contracts. All right. They committed a genocide. They are still committing a genocide, barbarism, crimes against humanity. And we had negotiations. At one point, we had a temporary ceasefire. Who broke the temporary ceasefire? Israel. It was signed by the defense minister, Yoav Gallant. The decision to reignite the war was signed by Yoav Gallant. Now we're finishing the ceasefire. We are re-engaging in war. That's we had such a long delay up until now. Why? Because Hamas told them we don't want a repeat of the same situation, having a temporary relief, even though we had people being killed during that temporary ceasefire, and put our people at risk. We don't want that. They started talking, slight de-escalations here and there, but the genocide is continuing, the suffering is continuing, the destruction is continuing. This close to a ceasefire. The Israeli delegation agrees on a ceasefire multiple times. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis are in the streets supporting the idea. Benjamin Netanyahu, no. Hamas agrees to a ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu, no. Recently, Biden's declaration, I'm saying that Netanyahu agreed and will confirm we will continue having a ceasefire even if they don't agree on phase 2. Rejection from Netanyahu. The negotiating delegation by the head of the Mossad, the Israeli army, the Shabak, the defense minister, all agreeing, and prime minister, this is the last chance. We don't have weeks to wait. Israelis are dying. Benjamin Netanyahu, no. And on top of all of that, they go and escalate further. They go and kill Nasrallah's top advisor. They go and kill Ismail Haniyeh in Beirut and in Tehran. And everything has a meaning. The level of these people, their significance in the sides opposing Israel, and the locations. And in Beirut, you had innocent civilians dying too in a civilian building. All right. What is that sending a message to Hamas? That these people, there is no talking with them whatsoever. And I find it unfortunate that the Arab mediators, Qatar and Egypt, are not realizing this by now. We all know that people want a de-escalation, you want to get this solved, but there is one side that is causing all of this. So whose side is that? That's Israel. So you need to apply more pressure on them. That's not working. So that's a massive part of it. The fact that Hamas haven't confirmed yet. Qatar is trying to. They're promising the Americans, we promise you we'll try and get a delegation. Mm-hmm. However, that's not confirmed. If it's going to be a delegation or a level of representation from Hamas, who are they going to be? And are they going to be there with the intent to negotiate, or just to show the negotiators, or the mediators, that we're there and we're listening, but we're not engaging, right? And it's very likely, it's very likely that they do not attend, and it's very likely that we see an attack by then. Mind over matter, Mahmoud. I've heard about 17 IOF and US mercenaries who try and infiltrate Yemen, but were caught in an ambush and all were alive. Did you hear about this? I did hear about this. We didn't have an official confirmation as far as I know. I haven't heard an official statement coming from Ansarullah, again, unless I'm mistaken. However, what I can tell you is that Israel is saying that we can attack Yemen. Okay, we can attack Yemen, and that we are willing to fight. We are willing to fight inside of Yemen. The report, I'm just double checking this report. It's coming from the opposing Yemeni government. Ahmed Arman told Arab News that the number of Yemeni personnel abducted by the Houthis during the continued crackdown has risen to 70. Some of them are staff of the United Nations, according to another report. So we haven't had an official confirmation from Ansarullah, meaning you could be looking at a group a combined group of people from the opposing government that is recognized and supported by Saudi Arabia, the same country that committed acts of barbarism against the Yemeni people and starved them to death for years, supported by Western countries. So the fact that they were like only Marines in Israel, that part hasn't been confirmed. And the Badger, Salam Mahmoud, Salam, some rumor has it that Iran is negotiating itself out of retaliation, possibly as far as the response not happening. What are these alleged negotiations with Iran about? Well, of course, from the perspective of the opposing side, so when we're talking about Israel, the United States, and all of the countries that oppose Iran, sometimes acting as messengers for the United States and Israel. From their perspective, so long as an attack hasn't happened yet from Iran, there is still time to solve it. So to them, there's still some hope. So the attack hasn't happened yet. Let's see what we can do with them. Can we talk them out of it? Can we offer them something that they will find acceptable in return for them not responding? Can we? All of these are reports. And in many cases, you're talking about propaganda. In terms of negotiations, there's always back and forth talks. Iran and the United States reached a level of understanding back in January when it comes to Iraq. When the Iraqi resistance was attacking bases of the United States in Iraq, we had a retaliation from the US against one of the bases of the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. They reached an understanding. From then onwards, the Iraqi resistance attacks were restricted to Israel. That has changed in recent weeks. But all of the confirmation is from Iran, and the confirmations are saying that we will be retaliating. And Ibrahim Ahmed saying Iran delaying the attack as part of the psychological warfare Israel is playing by assassinating the resistance leaders so as to put fear of nuclear response on the resistance. Yes, it's definitely part of the psychological war, and the psychological war is not just psychological, it's also material. You can see the material effects that are happening in Israel. And with regards to the nuclear, listen, I mean, the nuclear is meant to be a deterrent. That's not deterring anyone. You know, no one is being deterred, and no one's deterred by the U.S. Aircraft carriers. No one is deterred by the fact that Israel has. As a matter of fact, Israel is seeing as a punching bag now. But everyone's punching Israel. You know, at least the movements that are interested, they're punching Israel. So the punching bag of the Middle East now. They've lost their intimidation. The countries that haven't engaged, of course, or haven't used leverage, they stuck to their traditional position. But when we're talking about Hezbollah, when we're talking about, of course, Gaza and Iraq and Yemen and Iran, no one is phased. No one is phased, and nothing phased them. The United States had a coalition. Did this coalition do anything? It didn't do anything. It didn't intimidate anyone. It was said 3 out of 14 Hamas battalions were wiped off. Any truth? That's okay. Well, the report said 24. Firstly, they have 24 battalions. And that Netanyahu said 20 were eliminated. Previously, he said 20, and then he went down to 18, and then he said 19. At one point, we heard that all of them were destroyed. Now, although that was debunked by senior figures in Israel months back, now reports are coming from Israel. Now, no, that 20 are totally functional, and the remaining 4 are gathering their structure, and that they're restructuring over the ground, not just under the ground. And that's been evident from the actions that we've been seeing from the Palestinian resistance, and in particular Hamas. And again, it's not just Hamas fighting Israel in Gaza. They want to sell you it as if it's an Israeli Hamas. No. It's a genocide war against the Palestinian people, first and foremost. Secondly, the people resisting Israel, they have 13 resistance movements from all sorts of ideological backgrounds in Gaza. So, of course, no, that's not true, and that's evident from the levels of attacks that are happening on Israel. Blank stares, Mahmoud, will the resistance ever strike the head of Satan, strike of the Zionist war government? Well, the fact that they are having more safety measures on all of the leaders, they're restricting movements for people abroad as well, because they are considering the fact that Iran might have an attack on a senior figure abroad. The fact that Netanyahu cannot move unless he's authorized by the head of the security team and his security guards, the fact that they hide in bunkers 24/7, all of these things indicate that there is a massive risk of one of them being assassinated. However, I think that the main response that is being planned is not necessarily an assassination of a figure in Israel. That's definitely on the table, but that's not necessarily the biggest plan or the plan that's being prepared for most. I think that would be the targeting of Israel through most likely drones and missiles from multiple fronts. Marcus Jackie, does Iran can fight back against Israel, USA, NATO, a bunch of other Arab colonialists? Long-term war or short-term conflict? Well, when we talk about Iran, of course, when they are going to interfere directly, they have a backing, and they are being backed by Russia and China, alongside other countries too. So it's not going to be a case of Iran facing Israel, the NATO, and the United States on their own, alongside the Arab states. First, the Arab states that are in the region, that some of them already took the shameful position of protecting Israel. That's how they were established anyway. They know the risk of joining any sort of action against Iran. They can be wiped off very quickly. But with regards to Israel, there is an option. There is an option of a back and forth attack. As a matter of fact, this is what everyone is preparing for. And the reason for that is that like I said, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli defense minister both confirmed that there will be a retaliation to an Iranian attack. And they are even talking now about a preemptive strike against Hezbollah. They're saying that, okay, we're waiting now. How about we don't just wait, we attack them? There is a likelihood of a long-term conflict. And listen, unless Israel uses non-conventional weapons, which will again expand things much further at a much larger scale globally, they wouldn't have the same capacity that they're having in Gaza, for example, when it comes to destruction. Why? Because when it comes to Gaza and when it comes to Lebanon too, although they're more limited with Lebanon because of their higher ability to take down planes and UAVs, and we saw that being demonstrated by Hezbollah, how they took down 3 of Israel's largest UAVs in the past 10 months. They're very close geographically. All it takes for the Israeli Air Forces to depart from a base a few kilometers far from Gaza, carry out whatever strikes it wants in crimes and barbarism, and go back. With Iran, you're talking about thousands of miles. You're not going to have the same dynamics, the same comfort, because all of the time that you're traveling, you're at risk. You're at risk. As a matter of fact, when they had a strike on Yemen in Al Hudaydah, we had senior figures in Israel saying that we did not expect all of our fighter jets to come back. And the attacks that we have seen in Iran, they haven't been with the Israeli Air Force. So I think it's more complicated, again, unless they use non-conventional weapons in Iran. But Iran has the capacity to have a back and forth with Israel. It's not like they don't. They would rather have a retaliatory strike that is massive, big, that will make an effect on Israel, and then, hope that Israel swallows the pill. But Israel doesn't swallow the pill. Israel, most of the time they strike back. The only time that we saw a different scene was when Iran had a strike on Israel in April. You know, we had a small minor attack on in a couple of parts of Iran that was nothing significant, and it wasn't declared by Israel. It didn't do any damage. Maybe Israel just wanted to say, look, we retaliated, but it was like nothing. It was a joke. But however, will that be the same now? If Iran is promising something very big, I'm not sure. And they have the capacity to have a back and forth with them. Mr. White thinks Smotrich claimed that the hostage deal surrendered to Hamas, they are just delaying. And Netanyahu said that. That it's a surrender to Hamas. And Smotrich and Ben Gvir are the biggest influencers when it comes to Netanyahu. They are the people who, have more of a say on him. When it comes to the coalition, they apply the most pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. So, you're talking about people who have a significant say when it comes to the government and what happens in the government. Funky, thank you so much for your super. You said Cyprus and their RAF base needs to be dealt with. That's if they participate. They were already threatened by Hezbollah and Pilla. Thank you so much for your super. Much appreciated for your comment. Thank you so much for that. And also Horacio Spinelli, Syria update, please. If you know what it is, thanks, much love. Well, the latest from Syria is the fact that Israel carried out certain strikes in Syria after reportedly receiving a shipment from Iran. That's not something very, special. They do that regularly. They've done that before the 7th of October. And they're doing that simultaneously with the Syrian attempts alongside other countries to have a reconciliation in Syria and have some sort of a peace process and some sort of stability. They, of course, don't want that because they know that a lot of the resistance front's maneuverability and transfer happened from Syria. And the virus 455 as well, much appreciated. Thank you so much for your super. And the Alchemist as well, thank you so much for your super. He said, Justin App, it appears that they were Blackwater mercenaries and IDF troops which were detected by the Russians and then were informed by the Iranians. The Houthis are all considered dead in an ambush. Yeah, that's probably another part. And thank you so much for that. That was from the Alchemist. And let's go up so we don't miss any of you, or as least as possible. And Francis Fitzgerald, thank you so much for your super. Tried sending it all and got booted. Yeah, the YT police, right? We have lots of policing. And my friend Dr. X, thank you so much. Much love to Brazil. He said, thanks for sharing. It was much appreciated, my friend. Thank you so much for your support. Much appreciated. The Tam McIntosh, Mahmoud, could Iran close the straits of do you mean Hormuz? Because unless you mean Hummus by Hamas, because many people say that they are able to close the Straits of Hormuz, if you mean Hormuz, and that's something that is heavily considered when you talk about the global economic situation. And again, these are things that are considered because everyone involved in what's happening, they want to make sure that their economy continues. Because if you talk about war, they need to fund the war. So Russia would be concerned about its economic ways, right, and routes. If you mean Hamas, that's not likely, although I assume you mean Hormuz. Mahib, Mahmoud, it's turning into World War III. Well, again, and please don't take it as, sensationalism or anything. I think it is. Yeah, there are many indications that this is turning into a world war. There's an argument that this is a world war. This is a soft or cold, world war, or, low heat world war. Because, like I said, you have alliances and you have battlefields in multiple places, in many continents across the globe. And what happened in Gaza is highlighting that further. It's pushing things further, it's increasing the tensions, it's making bonds closer with the countries that oppose the United States hegemony. And it's very likely to happen. It's very likely to happen. The question is, how will the people in power react to certain things? Like, let me give you an example of Israel now, okay? With Ukraine, they're coming to a realization, or at least they have come to a level of realization that they wouldn't be able to succeed with Russia. That's why we started seeing them trying to intensify their support for Zelensky. Previously it was banned on Zelensky to use American weapons. Now they have F-16s and people training them on F-16s. Now they are invading Russia. All of that is by America. Why? Because the United States administration, they call the shots. The NATO is their long arm in Europe, and Zelensky is their little puppet. Mm? With regards to Israel, it depends again on how will they react. There might be preparations to prepare the public opinion in the United States that, listen, Iran are really bad, and somehow Israel has still a right to exist as it is or defend itself, right? But in my opinion, the United States administration, I think they have a plan for the day after Israel. I think they have a plan, but they're trying not to lose Israel so quickly. And again, not for the interests of the American people, for the interests of big bucks, of the elite. And there are certain measures that are not linked to economy. There are certain things when it comes to Israel that are linked to belief and ideologies and evil. I mean, I do believe that some things are just pure evil, supporting the death and destruction of innocent people. I think there's a level of evil behind it too, not just pure economic greed for the military-industrial complex only. Okay, of course there's an argument there. Will they fight to death to save them? Let's see if they escalate with Iran, what will happen. Why? Because although they've been sending them whatever they need to fight and commit genocide and be an aggressor and a bully and a war criminal, they haven't fought on their behalf yet. And Israel has been saying all along that we're facing an existential war. So if this country that's an extension of the United States, is fighting an existential war, would you not go and support them militarily, literally deploy your army? That hasn't happened yet. Again, they're supporting them with everything. They're allied with them, strategic, save them. Hell, the US leaders say we're Zionists. But after the escalation that we're expecting, we will see if that works. We will see if it works, and if the United States will actually participate in this. And Horacio Spinelli is saying, I heard Syria recaptured an oil field, Al Umar or something. Yes, they did. Do you know anything about this or where else is going? They did. They captured forces aligned with the Syrians. They recaptured the Al Umar oil field from the United States. Now, did the US give it up and not fight back for it? That's another argument, but that's shifting. And we have also seen increased attacks on Ain al-Assad. Ain al-Assad, which is one of the biggest bases in Iraq, it also has been attacked. And the alchemist saying, I don't know how much coffee is wherever you are, my brother, but always give it up. It's my gratitude and appreciation for your dedication. Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for your dedication. Much, much appreciated. Thank you so much. Marvin Burgess again, thank you so much for your super. He said World War III false flag op kicks in. U.S. government freezes elections, stop Trump, feed war complex, and do for Zios. Look, there are many things to it. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I'll tell you what could be the thought process in the United States to an extent. All right, of course, they are used to being the country that is policing the world, the only superpower. But I really don't think they wanted this now. I don't think they are particularly happy with Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, we've had leaks from Joe Biden and Netanyahu's conversations, regardless of all of this support and worse position than Israel. Again, the US administration's position is worse than Israel because it's the enabler. He had conversations that were leaked to the media where he was swearing at him and shouting at him, you son of a you this, screaming. The latest one after they assassinated Haniya, they claimed that the White House was not happy with this assassination, and he had another shouting match at him, and he told him you have 1 to 2 weeks to reach a ceasefire. I don't think they wanted this. They're going through an election now. They want to make sure each party wants to have, its candidate winning. They're not succeeding with Russia. The public opinion is shifting against the war in Ukraine, in the United States. Europe, the war is losing traction in Europe too. There's more public pressure. So, but again, they know that things can escalate undeniably. If Iran responds, Israel hits back, what's going to happen after that? You're going to see things escalating. Sage Fishlin, or saying, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. He said, Mahmoud, why doesn't the resistance target Bibi and get this over with? He isn't popular in Israel. The majority in Israel has done this to Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. Well, firstly, I don't think it's an easy task for them to catch Bibi. That's number one. Secondly, although Bibi is the man leading this, the country that makes this happen is Israel. Bibi is the ultimate representation of Israel as it is, unfiltered, without any, curtains or veils or nothing. Him and Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they are Israel, but just as it is, without any, democracy coats or what have you, or sugar coating or whatever it is. And even if you look at the alternative for Bibi Netanyahu, listen, all of them declare that they don't want a Palestinian state. So if the United States succeeded, for example, in its pressure, because listen, there are arguments that the US has tried to have a soft coup in Israel. Don't forget Blinken tried to meet with the IDF chief of staff, and he was banned from Israel, and he was criticized heavily by Netanyahu's allies. But even if you talk about a man like Benny Gantz, or you have a consensus in not supporting a Palestinian state, apart from a tiny mini fraction on what's labeled as left in Israel. They just passed a law in the Israeli Knesset. They said that we can't allow a Palestinian state. So even if he goes, it's not as if you're going to see like this wonderful peace process happening all at once. No, what you will see is potentially a de-escalation, potentially a deal, yes, but I don't think that will last for very long. And the simple reason for that is the continuation of Israel as a supremacist state, as a supremacist apartheid state that does not have equality. They're not going to deal with the historical Palestinian rights, are they? They're not admitting or recognizing that there are Palestinian people. You need to understand that. Although they've been fighting for the past 8 years, like, who are you fighting? Who are these people you're fighting? People who claim to be something that they're not? It's absurd, but they still have that thinking process. So we'll continue with or without Netanyahu, and he is not the only problem. He is a representation of the real problem, which lies in Israel as an apartheid supremacy in the Middle East. And Gulliberg is saying U.S. military base Kharb al-Jir in Syria has been struck by several drones. Yeah, the tensions are rising in Syria. Tensions are rising in Syria. And I think you're having an exchange of messages happening. I think that we have messages being sent between Iran and between some of the resistance movements that are aligned with Iran in Syria and in Iraq as well, not just in Syria. Because listen, that deal that they had with Iran and the US, that deal that they had in January, there are arguments that by Israel assassinating these figures in Hezbollah and Hamas, that deal is over. Neither side said that this deal is over. But what we're seeing, in effect, is, well, we clearly don't really have an understanding. Now, although Israel did not admit that they targeted Haniya, the army said on that night we only had operations, or like they were specific with the wording, like strikes or military or Air Force presence in these areas, nowhere else. Even though the terminology was shady. Iran already blamed them, and Iran already blamed the US. They said that the US knew, the United States, they knew what was happening with the assassination of Haniya, meaning the United States is participant in what's happening. And if we did have this understanding between us in Iraq, that's clearly not the case. New Glow, what about the Saudi stance on all of this? Saudi Arabia would rather Hamas is eliminated in Gaza, and that Israel gets rid of Hezbollah, and that they get rid of Ansarullah. Why? Because first, they've had an ongoing war with Yemen for so many years. Don't forget about their crimes in Yemen. The Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, said in an interview 4 years ago that Mohammed bin Salman requested while visiting the United States that the US assassinates Nasrallah through Israel, and that he will pay the expense of a war that would break out. Now, for the Secretary General of Hezbollah to declare that, that's not something light. Usually when he wants to criticize Arab states, he'll say the Arab states, he wouldn't name them, but he named them because he received verified information, and he declared that. And if you go to the mainstream media in Saudi Arabia, even if you listen to some of their religious scholars, you will see the tone, right? They even were criticizing people who say, rest in peace to Ismail Haniyeh. Some of them call Hamas an evil. Some of them say Israel are the true owners of the land. Again, we're not talking about a representation of the whole population here, but we're talking about the general tone that's happening in Saudi Arabia and by the government. And that was from New Glow. Marcus. Thomas saying 800 US military bases is just not sustainable. At a certain point, they got to reduce that number, really thin the bases that will be just cardboard bases. Look, the whole presence is there for what, really? And especially when countries are complaining about it. Like if you have a country that's welcoming you, whatever their reasons are, okay, but in Iraq, for example, that's heavily disputed. And Marcus, Mahmoud, what if Western countries, they're attacking on oil facilities and nuclear facilities? Don't you think we are going for a global war? Oh, if they attack nuclear facilities in Iran, and yeah, of course. But again, they realize that this will come at a really, really, really heavy cost. And that's why the likelihood of a global war, a World War III, is just around the corner. And unfortunately, we don't have very wise people in power with integrity. As a matter of fact, some of them support the idea of taking down the human population a bit to make it easier to control. Dennis Huggins, thank you for your super. You said war means nothing to the elites. They will have food on their table and transport to safe areas. Everyone else loses. That is very true. Many of them already have bunkers, and they have nuclear bunkers as well. It's the people who will suffer. And thank you again, Dennis, for your super. Joe Kyle, okay, that's interesting. You said the negotiations have been playing the same role for Israel and the US as the Palestinian peace process in bygone days. Listen, this peace process is exactly what it is, what it's labeled, a peace process, right? More like a pseudo peace process. We had the Oslo Accord since 1993. We've had negotiations. We've had maybe, a semi-hopeful period with an Israeli prime minister who was assassinated, Yitzhak Rabin, in this shady assassination. And I wouldn't put it past the US administration for having some sort of involvement at the time in the deep state in Israel. But 30 years on, what do we have? Do we have peace? Do we have de-escalation? Do we have gestures of goodwill? Do we have signs that, listen, we're open to do this and that? No. As a matter of fact, from the Palestinian side, the negotiating side that we constantly criticize, they've given up so many things for Israel. But when it comes to Israel, no, constantly more arrogance, more expansion in the West Bank, more squatters, more killing, more administrative detention, more kidnappings, more executions, more checkpoints, more walls. Gaza has been under siege for 17 years before the 7th of October. A population consisting of 73% refugees who were expelled from Palestine, historical Palestine, before the establishment of Israel, that Israel refuses to take back. And they don't want to implement equality internally. Well, what does that tell you? It's just a process, all talk. Now, after a certain point, like you start to say about the Palestinian side talking, like, what are you talking about exactly? How many times are you going to ask, right? So, and it looks like now, look, with this call of negotiations on the 15th of August, listen, who doesn't want to see hopeful signs, right? Of de-escalation, of genuine peace, of this and that. It isn't happening. You're seeing the contrary from Israel. Always. Escalation, pushing further, more chaos, more war, trying to drag the US in, trying to drag for a global war. And again, the other side, and that's the irony here, everyone's going to Iran. Oh, please don't attack, listen, this and that. Don't attack. Don't attack. Like what they were telling Hamas in the beginning and condemning Hamas. Condemning Hamas, even some people who used to like act like they're supporting the Palestinians. Condemning the oppressed, the occupied, the besieged, the people who lost at least one family member, all of them. Now dozens, you have whole families were wiped off from Gaza. Do you know that? Some families were killed, all of them. There are certain families that no one remained from them in Gaza. Used to live in certain buildings, 120, 130, every single one of them are gone. That family is no longer there. That surname, you don't see it. Thomas, the US trying to destabilize Venezuela while supporting Ukraine and Israel with weapons while competing with China. The US is overstretched, far overstretched, and they still think that we're in the 50s. We're in the 1950s after post-World War II formation. That's no longer the case. We've had significant changes in the past decades, and the world that we live in isn't a world that's run by morals or values or democracy or freedom of rights. Right, equal freedom and universal human rights. No, it's ruled by power. So you have power, you have a say. You don't have power, you don't have a say. And the countries on the receiving end of this approach, they realize that, listen, we have nothing else to do. We have to be powerful. Even when you talk about the rise of China and Russia, the US constantly acts recklessly with them and has a hostile approach with them and breaks agreements with them and pokes them, right? Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have seen them striving to have so much power. And that was about it. Okay, let's wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. For those of you who haven't watched my previous video, I did have a video earlier on that you can go ahead and watch. I'll most likely have another video in relation to Ukraine. Thank you so much for all of the community, all of the members, subscribers, new and old, everyone who sent supers, much appreciated. Pia, Ig, Chihuahua, The Alchemist, The Virus, Horacio, Pilla, Funky, Dr. X, Francis, The Alchemist, Horacio again, The Alchemist, thank you so much. Marvin, The Alchemist, Dennis, and MF, thank you so much for all of your supers, much appreciated. I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow. Apart from that, stay safe, everyone. Take care, stay blessed, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.